We got another small bit from Vegapunk's final message, and while it's really just 2 words, it gives us enough context to better understand his message about there seemingly being another Joy Boy member in the D clan. This further ties with the concept of what it really means to become Nika and Joy Boy at the end of the chapter, which I personally feel is a fantastic way to culminate Bonney's character arc, and Oda's own way to convey one of the most fundamental core themes of the Egghead arc. So allow me to explain both of these elements as we better understand both the lore and themes of One Piece. On the cover, Yamato finally sets off from the Flower Capital, with the next destination being Udon, where the prison mines were, now once again a forested area. Yamato can be seen carrying the bento box that was a gift from Otsuru a couple chapters ago, as well as a backpack for the journey that was also seen over the past 2 covers. On the back in the distant Flower Capital, you can still spot the Straw Hat Jolly Roger perched on the castle's sakura tree, which, in case you didn't know, is specifically in the shape of a half moon, the symbol of the Kosuke clan. Back on Egghead, the giant, which was sent flying by Workery, lands at sea by the coast, hitting several marine ships. Seeing it right next to the battleships, we can get a feeling for just how immense its size is. An ancient giant like Little Ors Jr. was already as big as a battleship, but it seems like the ancient Iron Giant dwarfs even their size. In fact, this puts into even bigger perspective when comparing Workery to the marine ships with just how massive he is, as so far he has been fighting against actual giants, Giant Luffy included, which may have made it hard to realize just how massive he really is. The Marines are also understandably confused as they call the Iron Giant an iron creature, as they couldn't have much comprehension of what an actual robot is like. However, surprise surprise, Vegapunk's message is actually not over yet. In just a little tidbit, but we get some extra words to his final message, being Sono Namae. This translates to that name, making his final message, "To those bearing the name D scattered across the world, within you there is another that name." This may not seem much, but it does actually support the idea that the reading of Vegapunk's last message from last week was the former of the 2 we speculated. To refresh you on it, the use of within you in Japanese could be interpreted in one of 2 ways. Either Vegapunk meant that within the D clan, as in among their members, there was a certain another, or that within the D clan members themselves, as in within their actual bodies, there was something else existing, like a hidden power or will or whatever. But in this case, the mention of that name would seem to suggest that he was indeed speaking about a specific individual within the D clan that stands out in some way. And we've taken the approach of thinking that this individual could actually be maybe a traitor, an outlier like Rocks or Blackbeard that are working against the Dawn. But we have to keep in mind this is likely something that Vegapunk has to have known about, and I just don't think that Vegapunk really knows about Blackbeard, or rather his intentions or anything like that, from just reading some poneglyphs. Rather, I think this is another case of Oda's razor, where the most obvious answer may just be the correct one, and I think that the safest interpretation of this message may be, "To those bearing the name D scattered across the world, within you there is another Joy Boy," with the another here being the particle mo in Japanese, like mo hitotsu Joy Boy, another Joy Boy. Even continuing that, the continuation of the message could be something like, "That name, Joy Boy, is a name that is passed down to a future individual," or something like that, indicating that a new Joy Boy arises by essentially bearing that name like a title or a nickname. We know this in the fact that Luffy has been called the new Joy Boy by characters like Oden, or in the present, Zunisha, who acknowledged Luffy as Joy Boy after he awakened the same fruit that the original Joy Boy possessed, and once awakened, the fruit that lets him turn into the mythical character of Nika. And we can further support this by the fact that Vegapunk was already aware that Luffy had eaten the Nika fruit, out of virtue that earlier in the arc he rushed to see the transformation of what he called the Warrior in White. Since he already knew that Nika was a fruit that allowed the original Joy Boy to stretch like rubber, he likely made the connection that Luffy may be the new user of the fruit, since he mentioned there being no Gomu Gomu no Mi in the original editions of Del Fruit illustrated encyclopedias, so he already made the connection, meaning that he was aware that a new Joy Boy did arise and was likely trying to inform that to the D-clan here. Now this whole concept of there being another Joy Boy is also incredibly fitting given what happens at the end of the chapter, but we'll get there really soon. But keep in mind, while this may seem superfluous, it would have been quite a massive blow to the government if the entire world knew that a new Joy Boy would be coming to overthrow the government, instead of despair that could inspire hope to many people across the world. So it was fairly vital for the Gorosei to stop this transmission before it caused them further damage. The reveals don't stop there though, because the Iron Giant also gets to say its own piece as it falls into the water. An interesting detail about the ancient giant speech pattern is that interestingly it is all written in katakana. The reason for this is to make it sound more robotic, less natural, and thus sound like it is an actual robot pronouncing syllable by syllable, like a robot from an old cartoon. So essentially in his message he says, "Where, Joy Boy, where did you go? I wanted to meet you. I was certain you were there, Joy Boy. How weird. How weird." Essentially, it means that the Iron Giant was searching for Joy Boy, but now that Joy Boy is gone, it is confused, as it seems to have a fairly rudimentary understanding and programming in some way. This makes sense as we know the robot reacted to the drums of liberation, recognizing Joy Boy within the sound that he heard from Luffy's heartbeat. All this time, it was likely giving chase to Luffy within the Fabrio phase, trying to get to him before he was pushed into the water. However, when Luffy transformed out of Gear 5th and stopped beating the drums of liberation, the Iron Giant felt Joy Boy suddenly disappear since it couldn't hear the drums anymore, making it think that Joy Boy just up and vanished, leaving it confused. There's also the fact that several chapters ago, the robot mentioned, "I'm sorry, Joy Boy," meaning that it's likely seeking to apologize to Joy Boy for not having been able to achieve something, perhaps tied with what it was trying to reach at Marijois, where the god country of the Lunaria formerly was. This all of course changes at the end when the giant recognizes the drums of liberation once again when Luffy returns into his form of Gear 5th, as he exclaims, "There he is," showing how he recognizes Joy Boy from the heartbeat of the drums of liberation, just like how Zunisha did. As Vegapunk's message cuts around the world, more folks from other locations react to the sudden end of the transmission. Beyond an unnamed location with particular traditional clothing, we once again get to see a shot of Yuba in Alabasta. We get to see not just Koza and his father Toto, but also Kappa, the little kid from the Alabasta arc. But even beyond them, we can once again spot Eric, Koza's friend from the Revolutionary Corps, and what may actually be another one of his friends, Farafra. The next shot takes place in the town of Whiskey Peak, when many often also mistake as the name of the island, which is in actuality Saboten Island, which translates to Cactus Island. There we see the now independent bounty hunters that were previously working for Baroque Works, which include Mr. Nine and Miss Monday, as well as what is implied to be their child, who first appeared during a previous cover story. But beyond them to the right, way more hidden, is actually Miss Catherine, a very minor background member of Baroque Works that tried to attack Zoro at Whiskey Peak by disguising as a nun, but was still defeated. And finally, at Dressrosa, once again, Leo believes the lies of the government alongside Rebecca, who is still wrapping up her training with Kiros. Back on the island, the Gorosei ask York how many punks are still around. York mentions that currently the only ones accessing punk records are two, Lilith and Atlas. As we know, Stella should be dead, as should be Shaka and Pythagoras, sadly the only other two punks that were present during the recording of Vegapunk's broadcast. The odd one out here though is Edison, who we did see alive just recently, but this could mean one of two things. Either one, he was so damaged that he ultimately broke down and died as well, having used his last strength to lengthen the cloud's further escape, or two, he purposefully or accidentally disconnected from punk records in order to go unnoticed by the government, but it's hard to say without further details. Luffy and the giants make it safely onto the giant ship called the Great Eric as it sails away. Luffy can be seen having lost his top outfit due to having transformed as Nika, and behind him Sanji and Frankie are thanking the giants as well. Bonney has helped dispose of Bluegrass and Doll by turning them into kids, with Bluegrass exclaiming how frustrating it all is. However, this could be taken as a joke in Japanese, as you could interpret what she's saying as her being jealous of Bonnie's powers, due to the fact that she likely wishes she could make herself be younger as well, especially at that age. Mars heads for the ship and fires a blast of fire onto it, similar to Kaido's Bolo Breath. This sets the entire ship on fire, which becomes an issue, as now they'll need a way to douse the flames. Jim is usually quite good at this, with his fishman Jujutsu, having already done so when Big Mom tried to set the Sunny on fire, but he would need to get down from the lava face and into the water to do so. Some of the giants try to block the attack, which doesn't do much, but we actually get their names, being Bjorn, which means bear, which we've seen during Big Mom's flashback are creatures native to Elbaf, and Sig, which is a common abbreviation of Sigrid. Suddenly, however, the seas begin to shake as the water itself turns into rubber. This may actually be how the Sun is able to safely land from the lava face without being damaged, as instead of crashing onto hard water, it can fall onto bouncy water where it can more safely land, though the Marines mistake this as being the sea levels rising. As Luffy transforms, he encourages Bonney to transform along with him by using her powers, as she did before when she tried going into Gear 3rd, and so Bonney tries to channel Luffy's imagery of freedom by trying to replicate an image of freedom herself, where she can transform into a shape resembling that of Nika, what she calls her most free future, which ties into the title of the chapter, Become Free. We know that Bonney's powers have limitations. For one, it seems that distorted future can only apply to herself so far, and it only seems like it only changes the physical properties of her body. This has allowed her to distort her body in ways that it can look differently, such as stretching her arms, or in this case, changing the color of her hair. If she's somehow able to apply this to her heart as well, she could even replicate the power of the drums of liberation, or rather just the sound of it. But on the other hand, we don't know to which extent she may be able to replicate Luffy's cartoonish effects, and at the very least, the paramecia side of the awakening where Luffy can turn his surroundings into rubber shouldn't be possible for her, and she also shouldn't be anywhere near as strong as Luffy, as this is based on her body, not his. It is something that for the most part is more of a cosmetic change that simply allows her to stretch her body around more freely through her own powers. I understand that a lot of folks though might try to look at this more from a power scaling perspective or whatnot, but that's not really what we're here for. Instead, I think that this is a brilliant narrative moment because it serves as a perfect culmination for not just Bonnie's own story and character arc, but also that of Kuma, tying in with a beautiful knot their storylines across this entire arc. And to help you understand that better, let me try to illustrate why I think that this is such a fantastic culmination to her character arc. As we've established already several times, Nika isn't real. Joy Boy is a real person that existed during the Void Century, the first pirate, but Nika in itself is a mythical character, hence why he only exists in the form of a mythical devil fruit. He is quite literally a cartoon character, one passed down in stories that serves to inspire others despite not being real. I've even gone on to explain how I think that the original story of Nika is the laugh tale that Roger found on the final island, literally the One Piece itself. But for now, let's just put that theory aside and simply stick to what we know for a fact, that Nika is a fictional character, regardless of which story or which legend he may have originated from. The fact that Nika doesn't exist makes him essentially a lofty ideal. He is a fictional character, he isn't meant to be real, so the way that he exists is almost unrealistic. Nika is someone who is happy all the time. He's always laughing and singing, doing a pose that is meant to represent the celebration of a party. We all wish we could be that way, always happy, always positive, and willing to just be friendly, joyful, and willing to party, but the reality is, life is tough. We often grow depressed, struggle, deal with things like anxiety and fear, and it's easy enough to tell someone to just be happy, but so many of these things can feel so out of our control that it's hard to really achieve that sense of joy. I think that's why a lot of us find escapism in fiction, in stories just like One Piece. I think that's why often many fictional stories and their characters are so idealized by us, because we perceive them like a perfect ideal. We see someone like Luffy enjoying his adventures, being so happy and joyful, and we kind of wish that we could be like him, being able to have such a positive mindset of life where we can enjoy it to the fullest in spite of all the struggles it throws at us. In a sense, Luffy is still struggling just as much as us. He's constantly injured, suffering sometimes physically and mentally, and sometimes dealing with loss and struggles, but he still manages to push through it all with a positive mindset. And while you might consider that idealized, I think Oda is specifically telling us that it doesn't need to be. Think of it this way: this relationship that most of us have with Luffy, this idealization that we have with him, is exactly the same identical dynamic that Bonney and Kuma have with Nika. Nika is a fictional character that they idolize and gives them hope in their lives, but both of them have been aware of the fact that he isn't really real. Kuma knew this all along and confided in Vegapunk that Nika was just a legend, while Bonney had to accept the painful truth while she was confronted by by Saturn. This caused her transformation to falter, as her lack of belief in Nika means that she isn't able to visualize transforming to him as a realistic future she could turn into. So in the end, to them, Nika was just a fictional ideal, just a form of escapism, of dreaming of being someone you'll never be. But here, Luffy is telling Bonney that's not the case. Nika isn't just a fictional ideal. You can become Nika. In fact, Nika isn't even something limited to a devil fruit transformation or something as simple as that. Being like Nika means being willing to have the same positive outlook in life that he does, and see the positivity of things even among the most painful of struggles. That is what it means to be really free. It's the pure embodiment of what the joy of hope is meant to stand for. It's Oda trying to tell us, the readers, that you can become like Luffy. You don't need to be Luffy or have weird stretchy superpowers in order to be as free as he is. You just need a similar mindset in being willing to think positively. That's the key to being free. That's the key to being Luffy. It's easy to tell someone to just be positive, especially when they can't down on a biological level. Trust me, I'm saying this not just as someone who has dealt with numerous health issues and anxiety disorders, but as someone who is literally being plagued by those right now as I am writing this. But it's specifically even more when you are in those mental pitfalls, and it's even more important to find a way to quantify that joy into reality, to understand what it is that brings joy into your life, no matter how little that may be. And the truth is that the One Piece is real. The series may be fictional, but the impact the story has on our world is very much real in and of itself. It's a story that encourages all of us to be a bit more like Luffy, and Luffy isn't meant to just be a lofty ideal that you'll never be able to be like, but what you should motivate yourself to be more like. That's exactly what Kuma did, by trying to be more like Nika and trying to focus on spreading kindness and positivity, while also being willing to stand against cruelty and fear, to encourage and help others to do and be better. It's Kuma's own beliefs in Nika and the kindness that he stands for that help him improve as a person and become the kind person that he is, in the same way that Luffy helps become a better person in life. And similarly, Bonney has followed a similar path where she hesitated in her beliefs, and finding out that Nika doesn't exist led to her whole worldview to come crashing down, because she realized the world doesn't hold the same pure ideals that her father tried shielding her with, which understandably so, considering that she's just 12 years old. However, now she is regaining faith as she realizes that Nika is real, except he really isn't. Luffy is able to embody Nika and look like him, but realistically, Nika is still not a real person. It's just an ideal. But Luffy is proving that those fictional ideals can be made reality, and through it, he inspires Bonney to become like Nika herself. She does this aesthetically, but that's not what really matters. What matters is that she's achieving this state by becoming free and accepting her own joy, to be able to smile and laugh even among the struggles of this fiery inferno. And I feel like this helps demystify Luffy a lot from being the chosen one. Luffy being Nika through his fruit doesn't automatically make him destined to be. It doesn't mean he's guaranteed to find the One Piece or that it won't take much effort. In fact, with the fruit having a will of its own, it's possible the fruit may even have chosen Luffy just due to the dream that he possessed. But what really makes Luffy a joy boy isn't the fact that he can transform into the White Warrior or the fact that he can stretch, it's his unbridled positivity. So while I think you can totally criticize this if you don't like it, I would still encourage to look at it less from a power scaling perspective and more from the narrative intent of what this is trying to tell you. I know some people will just tell you it isn't that deep, but you know what? Maybe it isn't, and that's what makes it so special. You shouldn't take things so seriously, and while being cynical is important, it's also just as important to also enjoy the more joyful aspects of life without over-worrying so much about the details. Look at the story of a young girl that suffered through so much, someone who believed in a fictional character that could save her, only to realize that said character has always existed within her and can save her just simply by teaching her to believe more in herself, to be free. She always wanted to show her father that Nika existed, only for her to become Nika herself by just embracing her own freedom. Just in the same way that all of us can become like Luffy by simply applying the joy that he shares with us every chapter. I was having a really rough day today before reading this chapter, but seeing Luffy and Bonney sharing so much joy, it inspires me to try to be better and have more believe and hope in my own joy as well, to become just as free like Nika myself. And I hope that you can be just as free as well.